I suggest to experienced pricing managers, structure your department, borrow what everybody else in the organization is doing and have an org chart and say, hey, this is the number of people we need to serve this basis of customers. Here's what each one is going to do. Put some procedures around it. And it kind of sounds like common sense, but I honestly, I don't see that happening in pricing in a lot of organizations. And I think it would benefit people.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for in eBay.
It's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the volatile relationship between them. So your company can win more business at higher prices. I am Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Jon Lucas. Here are 3 things you want to know about Jon before we start. And by the way, he's really curious what I'm about to say. He's in strategic pricing and business development manager at Cornerstone Building Brands. He started out in accounting. Oh, I'm glad he got out of that. And he loves hiking, especially since he moved away from Ohio, my home away from home. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Okay, so the easy one, how'd you get into pricing?
Well, I started in accounting, and as you say, thank God I got out of that, because I did enjoy it. Initially I liked the whole analytical side of business, but I was kind of always looking over my shoulder, and saying, what's going on over there in the sales marketing realm. And I think kind of my bosses kind of noticed that about me as I kind of moved up. I was an accounting manager running the month-end close, and they kind of said, hey, you look like your interest is kind of waning here. Why don't you try bring up our pricing department and have some an small inside sales team that I would manage, and I did that, and I just kind of found that I wouldn't have been I don't have the brain to be a accountant full-time or to be a salesperson full-time, but pricing is kind of it gives you the ability to kind of do both, and and that I could get passionate about be able to use the analytical side of my brain and the the sales and marketing oriented side. So
yeah, so you said you listen to my podcast quite a bit, which means I talk about value constantly.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious, when you first moved into pricing, did you think it was going to be about value, or did you think it was going to be about cost plus?
I thought academically you're taught, the book smart people were all about value, but then I thought once we get into the real world, this is all going to be cost plus. That's what I thought. And then, that's kind of how our system was set up when I first started working on it. And then I said, man, we just got to push to get away from cost plus and onto the market level pricing as much as we possibly can. So, that was kind of what I really tried to drive toward and kind of get the team on board with that concept.
Nice. And so just so that I have my mindset, what does Cornerstone do?
We manufacture metal buildings and metal building components. So a typical example everybody can relate to: you're driving down the highway, you see a storage building. Okay, so we buy steel coils, manufactured into all the parts that go into a metal building, design the metal building, ship it to the job sites, and our customers erect the building. Use also things, fancier things, schools and churches. Airplane hangar would be a good example, warehouse distribution centers. So we got that. That's our pre-engineered metal buildings division. And then our other division is our components division, where we sell the individual parts of a metal building. So that would be in individual panels or structural members and the trim and that kind of thing. So we kind of have, people think of the yachts versus rowboats analogy, like our engineered buildings, those are our yachts, everyone's unique. And then our rowboats are our components, where everything coming off is identical. So you got to handle the pricing, obviously, in 2 completely different ways.
Nice. And so tell me about value. How do you think about value for these products?
Yeah, I think about the feedback I hear from our customers is, we prefer to do business with you. And then I say, okay, well, that's the good indicator that we have someone's going to tell me something about our value, and part of it is the high level customer service that we provide. Part of it is the the quality of the physical product that they can rely on. And a lot of it has to do, honestly, with our with how we work with them to design the building. On a customized product, there's a lot of complications that go into it. So certain competitors are better than others at helping the customer design that product. considering everything has to be up to, very specific building codes, and there's a lot of, there's an art and a science to it. There's a lot of value that we bring, I think, in terms of helping our customers get to where they need to be for a complex product.
Nice. So I love the fact that you brought up the fact that customers say we like to do business with you because, and then we can list these reasons and start to go through that. I start to go through what those reasons are. It almost sounds like it only makes sense for repeat purchases. Can you get that value message across for new customers?
That is a challenge. When we are out, kind of soliciting new customers, we do ask them, the questions of how they're getting, value from whatever competitor that they have, and we try to train that price should not be the lead thing to go with. We try to explain, hey, look, we do it a little bit of a different way. I think one thing that that gives you a little bit of a advantage there if you're in a highly configured product situation is that really there has to be some difference between you and the competitors, because there is no one standard way of doing it. So we can at least talk about our differentiation. Say, hey, here's something we do that's a little bit different than our competitors, and maybe that fits your business model a little bit better. So we kind of focus on how we differentiate ourselves.
Nice. And so I was kind of hoping you would say, here's what we do differently, and here's how that matters to you. Here's how much value that delivers to you because we do this differently.
One of the things could be lead times. We're a larger player in the market.
Yep.
We're one of a few national players, a lot of regional players, and we can say, listen, we can physically get it to you in a faster lead time. Another way of we add value is from a consultative selling approach, we do have some highly skilled long tenure employees that can help out a lot, and we try to paint the picture and give the perception that, look, we're here to kind of hold your hand through this process, and some of our competitors frankly don't have the manpower to do that. Another
Nice.
differentiator when into something that's again highly configured, experience of the whole customer service team is a big deal, because you can't just get somebody off. They could be the smartest person, hardest working person off the street. If they don't have experience in this industry, you can only learn so much about it so quickly. So, tenure is a big differentiator for it. So,
all right. So we started this out by talking about value, and I thought I always think value is really important, but let's get rid of that value stuff. Let's talk about costs. Now, one of the things that you had said to me was you're passionate about managing cost volatility. And I find this a really dangerous topic. I love it as a topic, but I find it really dangerous. What do you think? How do you manage cost volatility?
yeah, so we've always had, we're a really easy example to think of. We got basically one raw material, and it's steel, and steel follows an index, and it wouldn't be uncommon to see it, change by 20%. That would be a volatile situation. In this past year, well, if in 2020 to 2021, going from the low point to the high point, there was a 330% difference.
Wow.
That's a massive price increase. That was in September. Right now, it's come down 142% in the last 5 months. So it's very, very volatile industry. But the way to manage that, our primary strategy for that is to have a weekly meeting between sales, finance, and pricing, where pricing kind of takes the lead and sets the agenda. And we review a standard set of reports, and we talk about several topics, and cost is one of the main ones. Where are costs going? What are the supply and demand factors that are going to affect our costs over the next couple months? So we review, hey, look, this is our view of where costs are going. And we kind of combine that with what our plant manufacturing capabilities are, and then the feedback we get from the sales team as to where the market price level is. So we kind of go through and discuss those kind of three factors and come up with the pricing strategy that helps us manage that cost volatility.
Okay, and so how do you? I didn't hear you say the word value in that whole conversation. So how do you add value into the cost volatility conversation?
Well, the value, to me, comes on when we actually make the pricing move. Um, and we determine, where we're going to set our prices somewhat based on our costs, but not completely based on our costs because we got a price to the market level. So when costs move, we know we need to make some kind of pricing move. And it doesn't have to be the same as the cost index. Cost could go up 5%. That doesn't mean we're necessarily going to go up by 5% because that's where we get to the value. So we may say, okay, in order to maintain our margins, we have to go up by 5%. But look, we are in a position where we're providing more value than the competitors at this particular point, say in this particular region. We say, look, we have an advantage in the West right now. Our competitor is out of product, or they went down, or something's going on there. So it's like, we've got the value, we're adding more value than somebody else. We have a better lead time over there, we've got the advantage. So instead of raising that price by 5%, we may, take advantage and do a little bit more. Then conversely, we may say, look, we're in trouble with these other customers here, okay, in this particular base because we short shipped them or whatever the case was. So yeah, costs went up, but we're kind of behind the 8-ball on the value there. So we need to catch up a little bit and do a little bit more of a, dial in the pricing a little bit differently. So depending on, so you can kind of use the cost fluctuation as the starting point. Then we look at where the value is, and that's where we set our prices.
You know what I'd never thought about, and I love this because I always learn something new. What I never thought about was these rapid cost fluctuations in your industry are giving you an excuse to change prices frequently.
That's right. They and of course that comes with its own challenges though, right? Because you could want to change your prices quickly. This is probably another, I don't know if value is the right word. It's a value to us, maybe not as much to the customer, but you could want to change prices. Like we'd like to make a price decision every week. You can't always administer it that quickly, right? Your customers can't always take it that quickly. So, one of the things we've invested in is to say, hey, what can we do internally to give us the ability to actually administer that price change as faster? If you think of your competitors are only getting up, if we're making price decisions every week and they're making price decisions once every 6 weeks, we've got a much better chance of capturing more margin.
Yeah, so it's certainly true, but I got to tell you what I'm super curious about right now is what's your sales cycle, and do you commit to a price and then go buy the steel, or do you buy the steel and then commit to the price?
Commit to the price, then buy the steel. Which means our forecast of what that steel cost is going to be for when we're going to buy it needs to be with our price. So if we're going to ship the building 6 months from now, but we're going to buy the steel 4 months from now, then we got to make sure that the revenue and the cost for the P&L line up so the pricing decision makes sense. So that is obviously that's a challenge.
Yes. And so if I get a customer, just talk through this with me for a second. I get a customer and they agree to pay $100, and we did that because we thought the cost of steel was going to be 50 at the time when we have to buy it. And the cost of steel goes down to 20 because it's so volatile right now. Do we revisit the price with the customer?
We've had to do that during COVID because there was basically a shortage and such an increase in costs so quickly that we've had to do some revisiting. We normally don't do that. You're right. There are times when you come out ahead of it because you're forecasting. The danger there is that you really just want to make sure that you use your manufacturing assets in the most intelligent way possible. Part of the risk there is that if you can see a lot of really good business out there, and if you get too aggressive at it, and then what the scenario happens that you just said, where the cost changes, you could potentially book up your plants with lower margin business than you would like to. And we've fallen into that. We've seen competitors fall into that. It's part of the chess match.
Yeah. So if we play this back into the value, which is what it always matters when we think about pricing, the moment the buyer is making the decision, the value to them is what was my alternative, right? So I could have bought from your competitor, or I could have bought from you. And assuming your competitor has some pricing forecast or costing forecast for steel, or or they're going to buy the steel immediately as soon as they get the order so that they don't have to hedge it or something like that. So after that point, from that point on, it's just a financial decision, right? When are we going to buy the steel? When are we not going to buy the steel? We're essentially playing the markets at that point, playing the steel market, if there's such a thing.
Right.
It's a fascinating business. It sounds pretty challenging.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and we've got to, we try to put you can put some safeguards around your cost volatility to some degree, with the way that you write your contracts, but that you can kind of do some hedging there. But yeah, like you said, it's you're predicting things out in the future, and it's not always going to be perfect. You just got to do the best job you can.
Yep. Always. Cool. So you had also said to me that you've used a bunch of the SAS-based programs like Zilliant and PriceFX in particular. What, first off, did you use them at this job? And then what do you think they got for you? What was the value that they delivered?
Yes, they're both, we've used them at this job in different divisions and over time. What it got us kind of goes back to what I said about administering the price changes as quickly as you'd like to. They do help us make price changes more often. So we can take advantage of, like you said, cost volatility gives you the opportunity or the excuse, right, to change prices. These software programs do help us administer it that, a little bit more quickly. They also help you get a little bit more precise. So you do have the opportunity to say, hey, you know what, we want to go up on our low complexity buildings by a different percentage than our high complexity buildings. Or we want to go up in the north different than we want to go in the southeast, or something like that. So you can get a little bit more granular with your pricing. So I think those are kind of the main things that those software programs help us with.
So it enables you to change prices quickly and more granularly. Are you guys actually changing prices weekly?
For our configured products, we don't actually do that. I like to think theoretically, I like to say that we make a pricing decision every week, whether it be to go up, down, stay the same, or up somewhere and down somewhere. We like to think of it as look, we're making pricing decisions, at least in my mind. And then we don't always take market. That's always, another discussion is like, where do we pull the trigger and make these changes, and how often? I think it gives you an advantage though if you're at least trying to make decisions on a weekly basis, and you're putting them into the market, at a reasonable amount of time, when you want to, while your competitors maybe aren't willing or able to do that, or aren't confident that these price changes will work for them. That is one of the ways that we manage 300% price cost increase.
It's actually fascinating. I've worked with clients who, 3 to 6 months from the time they decide to change prices until they can actually get prices changed on the marketplace because of systems and agreements and stuff like that. It's absolutely insane that it takes that long to change a price.
I've seen very sophisticated, struggle with that. It's kind of like you could have the best pricing in the world that you want to charge. If you can't get it to your customers in a way that works for them, then you're nowhere.
Yeah, now it's pretty tough to increase prices the way I'm about to describe it, but I think I could decrease prices easily. And here's how I would do it. I would have a high list price, and I would tell my salespeople, here's the price you're allowed to quote, or here's the size of the discount you're allowed to quote. And so now we can change it without having a system to automatically change all that. But it's really tough to have a list price and have sales go in and say, yeah, we charge 30% more than this today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our plan B on the way down is, yes, you just open up the discounting window a little, but going, on the way up, asking salespeople to go over the list price is just, it's very difficult. And it could potentially look odd to the customer, and it's complicated.
Yeah. So what is it like working with the salespeople? Do you work closely with them?
I do. We have a great sales team here, which is one of the reasons I stayed with this company as long as I they had the best sales team I've ever worked with. You know, I like to travel, and our sales teams have regional offices. I like to go and participate in their their regional sales meeting where they bring all the people in, and then pricing is one of 10 topics you review during the meeting. But generally I like to go there and try to explain to them, pricing is really on your side. We're not a cop. We're not here to name and shame and try to wrestle a lot of control away from you. And from a salesperson's perspective, you think of the default position could be, okay, here comes the pricing person from the corporate, I know, the ivory tower, they may call it, right? And then, maybe this person doesn't understand our business and certainly isn't meeting with the customer like I am, so the default position can be kind of negative on pricing. But to them is that, look, we're trying to be a value add here. We're on your side. We're looking to protect you from, we're looking to do the analysis that you don't have time to do because you're getting on a plane, you're meeting with customers, you're dealing with back orders, you're doing that kind of thing. When you're in a competitive situation, you need some price guidance, call us, let us run some numbers, let us come back to you with a reasonable we'll protect you we'll make sure you're not undercutting one of your other customers, we'll make sure you're not charging too much, so I try to explain those kind of things, and in more cases than not, we're able to get the sales team kind of on board with what we're doing.
Right. And so the goal for you is to try to help them, but I could see how they would normally see you as this is the guy who's trying to raise prices. This is the guy who's trying to get more for a product and make my job harder. In fact, I've even heard of pricing people called the sales prevention team. One of my favorites. So, all right. Hey, Jon, this has been a fun conversation so far, but let's see if we can make it even more fun with the last question. Do you want to ask it yourself since you listen, or do you want me to ask it anyway? I'll ask it.
You can go ahead.
What's one piece of pricing advice you'd give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
I think putting some processes and structure around the pricing department would really help. A lot of companies, we do this with every other business, every other aspect of the business we do. We have, we have a standard onboarding procedure, right? We have standard training that people get. We have procedures in place to say, hey, if something goes wrong, in an IT department, if a server goes down, well, we know what the backup server is, who's going to handle it, But in pricing, we don't always really do that, right? We just kind of have pricing people that report, so we don't know who they necessarily report to in all cases, right? And we don't have any standardization. And the problem with that is that it only takes a few prices to get out there in the market, or that people see that don't make sense to them, or they're a little bit too high. And then, somebody can say, hey, this pricing organization is, it's disorganized. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the case, So I think, we just kind of borrow I suggest to experienced pricing managers, structure your department, borrow what everybody else in the organization is doing, and have an org chart and say, hey, this is the number of people we need to serve this basis of customers. Here's what each one is going to do. Put some procedures around it. And it kind of sounds like common sense, but I honestly, I don't see that happening in pricing in a lot of organizations. And I think it would benefit people.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty neat answer. One of the things that I find really interesting about pricing departments is no matter what you've defined as your job, there's a bigger job there, right? So there's always more that we could go take on, more that we could do. We could start teaching product management or marketing or salespeople about value better. We could create new pricing strategies. There's always something we could be doing that's above and beyond what this role is. So I'd almost think of it as, let's define the day-to-day, this is the work we have to do. Here's how we handle price escalations. And so let's go do our job. And then here's the stuff that we're going to add on top over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, if I could ask you a question about that specific thing.
Of course.
When do you find that there's a resistance in the organizations that you work with to take on a pricing project if it's anything less than ideal on day one? In other words, instead of a continuous, do you find there's resistance to the continuous improvement goal that a lot of pricing people like to initiate?
I think there is resistance to pricing change throughout the organization because almost always we're changing what somebody else has to do, and they're reluctant to agree that it's going to work, or we're not sure that it's going to work, and so there's always resistance. And so the way that you told me that you deal with salespeople, where I go out and I say, look, I'm here to help you. I want you to be successful. We have to learn to do the exact same thing when we deal with marketing or finance or product management, right? I'm here to help you be successful. How do we help you? And I think as long as we always have that attitude, the resistance is less. But it's like raising somebody's price. They're going to hate you. Now the question is, how much are they going to hate you? Can we make them hate us a little bit less?
Yeah, absolutely.
So awesome. Hey, Jon, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being with us. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jon Lucas.
Okay, we'll have a link to Jon's profile in the show notes. Episode 163 is all done. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? Speaking of reviews, Kunwar C said about my book, Win, Keep, Grow, How to Price and Package to Accelerate Your Subscription Business. He said, this book has great content on how to think about subscription businesses and gives a framework to build effective subscription pricing. I was pausing throughout the book to take notes and assimilate the concepts. Thank you, Kunwar. The check is in the mail. And finally, if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.